Greetings everyone. Thank you for watching this video on the topic mental health for your children. So in today's topic we'll be discussing a lot about mental health issues and what basically mental health is in childhood, and before moving further I would just like to take 1 minute to introduce myself. So I am Anisha Dhingra and I've been practicing as a psychologist for past 2 years now, and I've been dealing with the children, I've been dealing with the parents and a lot of parental pressure what is coming up, parental stress that has been coming up. I've been volunteering throughout this COVID period, and I've seen that people are actually getting affected mentally and emotionally also. So we are dealing with that as well. And apart from that, I take counseling for adults clients also, and we do webinars also. So presently I'm working with Basil Mind, and we do online sessions with the parents and with the children and as adults also, and we do webinars as well, the way I am doing today. So as I've introduced myself, I would like to now talk about today's webinar. In the following slides, you'll see what this webinar is about and what can you get the most out of this webinar. Keep watching. So when we are talking about mental health issues in children specifically, I think it becomes important for us to first understand what mental health is. And to explain that in simple words, I would like to break this component or this whole terminology, the mental health and what psychologist does, and when mental health becomes problematic. We'll be talking about it, but first let's try to understand it, and to make you understand, I would like to break it into three simple components. The first component would be the mind and the brain. So everything over here is the first category. The second category would be feelings and emotions. The third category would be behavior and action. So anything we do is comes under the third category. So we say that when we are mentally healthy, when we are able to think and do all the mental functioning properly, we are able to feel and organize our emotions properly. I'll be talking about it more. And also we are able to manage our behavior, our actions, and choose them wisely. So based on this, I would explain it in more detail what the first category is. So very first category is about mind and brain. If I talk about this particular category, what are all skills comes in? The first skill would be learning. So let me start with this. So you are watching me, you're watching this video. First of all, you're paying attention to the video. This is a mental skill you're using. Then you are processing everything you're able to see and hear. Then auditory and visual processing is happening. You're able to think about it. Critical thinking, reasoning, logical thinking is involved. Now, when you're able to think, you're able to perceive something, you're able to learn something out of it. Learning is involved here. When we talk about learning, it becomes very important in children. Reason being, they have to learn the communication skills, the way they speak, the social skills, the way they behave in the society, the behavioral skills, academics they have to learn. They have to learn a lot of things, a lot of skills they have to do. So learning is a very important thing. Then they go with logical thinking, they go with planning, then we have reasoning, then we have problem solving, judgment, and similar things like this. So all these things all comes under the first component, the mind and brain, and we'll talk about what comes in emotions and our behavior. So if I talk about the problems that we see in this particular area, it would be specific cases of like autism, where the children are not able to either learn properly, or they're showing a lot of cognitive symptoms, though autism have a lot of emotional and behavioral issues as well. But we can take the example of autism here, or maybe we can take the example of learning disabilities or learning delays, difficulties, where the child is finding difficult to learn specific things. Like if my child is able to practice a lot of maths but he's not able to understand language, then that would be that may come under the category of learning disability. We'll talk about it in more detail as well. So two examples would be these. The third example can be developmental delays. Again, developmental delays can lie in all the three categories, but if I talk specifically about the first category, the communication developmental delay can be an example for that. Now let's talk about emotions. The second category is a very important category if I talk about mental health. It is emotions and feelings. And here I'm not just talking about children, though I'm focusing on children, but it has been seen in adults also. So if we talk about the emotions and feeling, there are four major points, right? So the very first point is सबसे पहले interpreting the emotions or identifying the emotions that you are feeling. So I have seen this. So some people, or in fact some children, mainly in autism and other disabilities or other problems as well, they find it difficult to identify their own emotions. So if the mother asks them, what are you feeling? How did you feel about it? It's difficult for the child to tell. Either he's happy, he's excited, he enjoyed that thing, or he's sad, or he's hurt, or he feels crying. So it's quite difficult to basically identify the emotions for those children. The second important point about emotions is expressing your emotions. So I've seen that parents really enjoy asking that how do you feel in this situation, and the children explains in a very elaborative form that they felt happy, they felt this and that. So this expression of emotion is very much important, but sometimes, in fact, children, adults both find it difficult to express their emotions to others. The third pointer is identifying the emotion of other people. So sometimes, like for example, a mother is very sad and she's crying, and the child see her, and when the child see her crying, he or she would go near the mother, and he would ask that, are you feeling sad? You're crying. He or she would try to comfort the parent. So this is about identifying the emotion of other person. But sometimes in childhood issue, in fact in adults also, some people find it quite difficult to identify the emotions of other based on their facial cues, their non-verbal cues. So this is one important factor about mental health. The other thing when it comes to emotion is managing your own emotions. So we all feel sad, we all cry, we all feel angry, we all feel irritated, and everything is happening with us. But the skill of managing our emotion and not bursting out, or even when we are bursting out, controlling it there and there is very important. So in children, what I've seen that sometimes, for example, if the child is having a terrible tantrum, he's throwing tantrum, they're having crying spells, they are hitting you, they are verbally scolding a lot of either siblings or parents or friends. So these things comes under managing the emotions, and it's a very important skill when it comes to child mental health, or in fact adults also, when we talk about the emotions and feeling category. And if I would like to talk about the issues what comes under this, then temper tantrum can be one thing that the children goes on faces a lot of problem. Then there can be excessive crying, there can be separation anxiety or any kind of anxiety. In separation anxiety, what basically happen that if the parent is not around, the child will feel a lot anxious and he will not be able to control his anxiety. Similarly, children also feel depressed, and we'll talk about it, but depression can be also one great mental health issue that can come up in childhood. Depression, anxiety, separation anxiety, then anger issues, and throwing temper tantrums or excessive crying. The third category, that is about the actions and behavior. If I talk about this category is the most commonly seen category, because it's very visible to the eyes of the parent or school teacher, or if anyone is having issue in this particular category, generally it's most easily seen, and therefore people would come mostly for these kind of issues. So if I talk about behavior action, anything that we behave or act upon can be a behavior and actions. So we have certain impulses. Sometimes we are angry, but how we modify our behavior, how we control our behavioral responses comes under this particular category. So if I talk about the behavioral disturbances that are commonly seen in children, that would be very easily we can detect ADHD children, where they're very hyperactive. They have a lot of energy. They would jump here, there, and their energy won't end, and they would have sleep issues as well. So this is one common example of behavioral issues. Then there would be anger issues or conduct issues, where you have seen children who are hitting people, who are breaking things, who are just not obeying anything. So these can be seen in behavioral activities. Then there would be selective mutism. In selective mutism, what would happen? That children would not be that vocal or like involved in activities or surrounding in one particular area. For example, my child may be very active at home, but whenever he visits the school, he would become mute, or he would not just simply respond to the people around that. So selective mutism can be seen. Another behavioral problem can be sleep. Sleep issues are very common in children, and I would emphasize on this: electronic screen syndrome, that is overuse of screen, can actually damage the sleep, and it further damages the whole development of the children. So sleep issues are very common issues that can be seen, and we can't ignore the fact that if we talk about teenagers, there are chances of risky behavior. That can be alcohol, that can be consumption of cigarettes, that is smoking. There may be exposed to drug usage also. They may engage in some risky activities. They may be engaged in some risky sexual activities also. So all these things comes under mental health when we talk about their behavior, and it becomes important for us as a parent and mental health professional as well that we monitor all the three categories. I would just revise once again. The first would be mind and brain, all the skills that are required to process everyday functioning comes from here. Our emotions and our feeling is the second category, and the last one is behavior, our actions, and how we manage that. So it's a combination, and this combination would come under mental health. When we are talking about mental health, and specifically towards the mental health of our children, it's very much important for me to mention about this particular thing. So some parents say that when I'm talking about mental health, my child isn't showing any substantial evidence, any very critical symptoms that tells me to visit a psychologist or a psychiatrist, and then they can simply say that my child is having a healthy mental health. But that's not true. Let me just try to explain this through another example of physical health. So suppose at this present moment I am not having any kind of fever, any kind of basically physical symptoms that can be categorized as physical illness, right? I am not having any physical illness, but presently I myself find it difficult to function well. I have a lot of difficulties to function in the do my work, and it's obstructing my work. It's making it more difficult to complete my work timely. So basically I am feeling some kind of issues. Then can I say that I am physically healthy? No, I cannot say that I'm physically healthy, because there is something not letting me work properly, function properly. Similarly, if my child is experiencing some kind of symptoms, and based on those symptoms the child is not able to function properly, or the growth and development of that child is hampered, or it's getting affected, we cannot say the child is having a good mental health, and therefore we need to work on that. So now let's talk about the skills in total that would be very important for us to see how the child is developing and how he is functioning. The very first skill would be cognitive skills. So I don't think so I have to repeat. I have already mentioned everything that happens in the first category, the mind and brain. It's taken care by the mind and brain, and that skill is cognitive skill. The other skill that we need to monitor about child's development is definitely the motor skills. That comes under the occupational therapist, but let's just quickly talk about it. So how your child's body is developing, how he is able to use his body for multiple functions like walking, running, jumping, skipping, all these activities, bicycling and playing games, how he is using his motor movements. Are they coordinated? Is he able to plan his motor activity? These all things comes under the motor development. Then there is this communication or language development, which is using the language or communication skills age appropriately. I wouldn't say that everyone need to learn these specific skills. It would be age appropriately. So for example, in this particular age group, my child should be able to use verbal language accurately, use the grammar. He should be able to see the non-verbal cues, identify them and respond based on that, and so these are the communication skills. So it's age appropriate. Then it comes, let's talk about the social skills, the age appropriate social skills. What are these? So if we go in a social situation, per se the child is going to school, he should be able to modify his behavior and his actions as per the school situation, as per the social surroundings. And he should be able to differentiate the social surroundings as well, like how he should behave in a school setting, with his friends, in his family, in public places, in private places. So getting to know about this definitely age appropriately comes under the social development. Then there is this behavioral development, where the child again learns to behave properly in the school settings and learns to manage their behavior according to the social situations. Then there's this emotional skill. We have already talked about it, how we identify the emotions, how we feel the emotions, how we express the emotions, and how we manage our own emotions comes here. The last would be the academic skills that are quite very important for children. Age appropriately, how your child is doing in academic performance. So these are several skills that we need to consider while judging or while understanding our child's development, and while trying to make an interpretation about his development, that is he doing well or isn't he doing well, and when we can go to the therapist for that. We have talked enough about the child mental health issues, and the problems basically what children deal with. Now the question comes that if I identify any such symptoms in my child, or there is any diagnosable thing that my child is going through, whom should I visit or whom should I go to? Who is going to help me out? So in that case, there are three people who can help you out. One is a counselor. The counselor can take care of the parenting. They can help you with the parenting. They can manage mild symptoms, like if the child is having sleep issues, behavioral issues, you can visit the counselor. And even if the counselor feels there is a need of a child psychologist, the counselor will themselves refer to a child psychologist. Now let me tell you the role of a child psychologist. A child psychologist is the person who has learned, who has expertise in understanding the whole child's development, and the child psychologist thus will be able to better understand your child's development, about what problems he's showing and what are the management and techniques for that. So any problem like ADHD, autism, developmental delays, behavioral issues, social issues, the child psychologist will be able to guide you better. If the child psychologist tell you that there is some kind of medications that are needed, for example in ADHD, in OCD, in childhood schizophrenia, we tell that there are need of medication, and then the child is referred to a psychiatrist. So we have three people: the counselor, the child psychologist, and the psychiatrist, who can actually help you out. And regarding the psychiatrist, I want to clarify this thing, that the medications prescribed to the children are not going to affect on their development as far as the psychiatrist is concerned. Reason being, if these things were there to disturb the child's development, then these things wouldn't have given on the very first hand. The psychiatrist wouldn't have prescribed this. So I am not a psychiatrist, I do not know much about medications, but what I know that these medications are going to help you out. These are going to help to deal with the symptoms, and along with the psychological help, along with the intervention the child psychologist will be giving, it can be very much helpful for your child's development. So now when we have talked about mental health, what mental health is regarding the children, and what are the common mental health issues children face, and also using the statistics, I have tried to show that how common mental health is, be it autism, be it ADHD, be it any other behavioral issue, be it any developmental delay, or be it any other psychological mental health problem regarding the children. It is very common in this world only. So we can't deny the fact that mental health issues are not there. And using the similar statistics, I would like to show, using the similar evidences, I would like to break a few myths that we have, that I have come across when I talk to the parents. So the very first myth that comes along is that children cannot have mental health issues. They are too young to have that. Unfortunately, that's not the reality. You have already seen the statistics. Mental health issues are real in children, and they need proper therapies. They need proper treatment plan for that. So denying is not going to help the problem. Another myth that come across is that if I visit the therapist or the psychiatrist or child psychologist and I take my children over there, they would simply get diagnosed. The very first thing here to clarify is that it's not, we only diagnose the children when they have evidential symptoms or evidence that they fall into this diagnosis. And there are a lot of problems for which we do not even give the diagnosis. We simply refer we give some treatment. For example, if the child is having behavioral issues, or they are having sleep issues, or maybe they are showing some symptoms that is because of change. So adjustment issues are there. Then there is this selective mutism. So it's not always that we give diagnosis. We do treatment without diagnosis also. And diagnosis, I do not believe, is a way of treatment. So more than focusing on the word diagnosis or the label, we focus on the treatment as well. And even if your child is getting diagnosed, it's for the benefit of the child, so that he or she can get a proper treatment that can actually save the life. So more than escaping from the word diagnosis, I would advise you to focus on the treatment the child is given that can actually save the child's life. The third myth that is mostly heard is that it's just a phase, all these childhood issues will resolve by itself. No, this is not the truth. It's not a phase. It won't resolve on its own. Though as a parent we try our best, as a supporter we try our best, but there are certain issues that need to be taken care of immediately whenever it happens with from a specially trained person in child psychology, or maybe psychiatrist also, they may need that. So even if you delay the process of treatment, it's going to affect the child's life. If I talk about autism in specific, autism is something that if the early intervention is provided to the child, there are high chances that the child will be functional, more functional. So there are certain areas where if you give the treatment timely, the child can actually benefit from that. So it's not a phase, it may not resolve in its own, and it may also proceed very, uncomfortably for the child and for the parents as well. Then what is her generally that all the therapies for the children are very expensive. So if you think that these are getting very expensive, there are different areas. There are government hospitals, there are government places, services given to parents, and the cost can be taken care of. So it's not, I think it's not worth taking burden about the cost more than the child's life. The last thing what I get to hear is parents are responsible for their child's development or mental health issues. And I would like to talk about it very clearly that for everything, parents cannot be put onto their fault. It's not the fault of the parents. Parents do not need to take any guilt about it. There are certain mental health issues that are linked with the brain functioning, brain anatomy, brain structure that cannot be, labeled or told to the parents that they are at fault. No. We have come across the last segment of this video, and I am very hopeful all the information that have been provided are helping you out in one way or other, and you are now able to see the mental health and the mental health issues and how common it is, and I hope I'm able to break down the myths that you might be having. So in this last segment, allow me some time to share certain tips and tricks that can actually save your life as a parent and actually help the child in their development, in their growth. So the very first thing from my end would be talking to your child, expressing your thoughts, expressing your feelings, however it may be. It may even seems like you are helpless, you are sad. It's okay. It's okay to tell your child that I am sad, I am not able to help myself in that situation. That's okay. If you are expressing, you're nurturing the bond with your child. You're telling him it's okay to express to mama or papa whenever you are sad. So actually you're helping them. That, you're giving them the skill of expression that can be very helpful throughout their life. The second tip would be to validate whatever they are feeling, and mainly in this time of pandemic, I think it's very much important. If the child is coming up to you and telling that mama, I'm afraid of what is happening outside, do not deny the fact, do not deny the feeling or invalidate the feeling. You can simply say, I can understand, I can see that it's stressful, I can see that it's scary, but don't worry. Don't worry, because we are here, because we are going to go through this together. So validating their emotions is very helpful. The third thing that comes up is actually asking them for help or asking them for suggestion. This increases their problem solving skills as well. So if you're having some problem, you're just sharing with them and you ask them that what do you think I should do in this situation. Never estimate your child so immature. They are mature, they will be able to give you suggestions, and if not, at least their problem solving skills are being used, and that can help them throughout the life. So the fourth tip would be listen without speaking, listen before speaking. So sometimes what happens that when we are very tired throughout our day, we are working in office, we are taking care of the responsibilities at home, it may get stressful. Sometimes we prefer not to listen that much. But when you're working with a child, I think it's important to listen to them first and then speak yourselves. The other thing can be tell the truth. Sometimes children ask several questions, mainly in this pandemic time, and when they're growing, they're curious about several things they get to know. So at that time, I would advise you not to lie. Lying can be the worst thing. I have personally seen an experience where the parent lied and the child was so anxious when they lied because the child took a very different meaning at that affected the child very badly. So do not lie to the children. Tell them the truth. If they are not in that age of understanding the truth, tell them through games. You can you can use puppet therapy, where you are being the mama puppet. You are explaining through another puppet. You can use toys in that matter. You can explain through stories. There are multiple ways of explaining to your child. So do not lie. Explain through games if possible. The fifth or sixth tip would be, believe in your children. Whatever they are saying, believe to them. If you do not believe, it shows that my parents are not trusting me, and it creates a self-doubt. Believe them that they will be able to resolve this particular thing. If they are into problem, do not tell them that you can't do this, you can't do that. This may become their language, their self-talk, which can be very devastating for their future. Like, I have gone through certain experiences where parents say that you cannot do this, and throughout their life, child have this self-talk that I cannot do this. So believe in your children. Do not doubt their capacities. Then appreciate their healthy choices. That's very much important. It's my last tip. That is, whatever they are doing, if they're doing well, appreciate and acknowledge and talk to them. Please talk to them and appreciate. So now we have come up towards the end of this whole webinar. I hope all the information provided to you, though it was very introductory, but I hope these things were very helpful. Do apply the tips that I have shared. These can be very helpful while taking care of your children. And similarly, just like today's webinar, we'll be talking about a lot of different things. We'll be talking in details as well. And I would be truly happy to help you out. Please take care, everyone, and thank you so much for listening to me.